Hello, everyone. I'm Veronica Pedrosa, joining you live from Manila, as I happen to be, but it's wonderful to be sort of under the aegis of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, a place of much storied exploits by its journalists and members, and still the oldest journalists club in Southeast Asia, and a place where I think a lot of people turn to find out what's really going on, and for journalists to understand more about the business and the environment in which they work. So I'm really honoured to be here, and even more honoured to be the host of this launch of the latest report by the Burma Human Rights Network. It's called Before Our Very Eyes: Myanmar's military junta commits crimes against humanity while the international community fails to act. I'd like to tell you about the way that this report has come into being with the presence of our very honoured guest, the Executive Director of the BHRN, who joins us live in the middle of the night from London, Jor Win. Afterwards, we have a distinguished panel of experts, including the External Relations Head of the NUG, the alternative government run by the opposition in Myanmar, Dr. Sasa, who needs no introduction. We also have Ambassador Stephen Rapp, who will talk about the ways to go forward from the findings of the report. So without further ado, let's hear from Jor Win, if we may. Jor Win, why did you go about putting this report together? What was the need for it as far as you were concerned?
Thank you very much, Veronica. Before saying this, I would like to announce that we are going to launch the report. This is the report we are going to launch here today before our very eyes. The reason why we started this research, and as we have seen that the bloodshed, the atrocities, the brutality, and the cruelties against the civilians, those peaceful protesters, which is unacceptable in this 21st century with our civilization, the way how its human beings are treated, disgracefully and in such a way, unacceptably. So that's a thing. We, as a human rights organization, we believe that we have a duty, moral duty, to everyone to stand up against that atrocities and brutalities. So we decided to do this research, and to conduct this research, and to draft a report, to prepare a report, to tell the world what's going on and how we have failed the people of Burma again, and what is the next step we are supposed to do, because when the justice is failed, there how the brutality and the genocide, and when we say never again, the crime against humanity, that all happened. So we have to stand up against it. And what happened in the Burma right now, what's happening right now, is clearly that crime against humanity has been committed by the military, and we shouldn't allow this happen again and again to happen.
Thank you very much indeed, Jor Win. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to move on quite quickly so that we hear from all the different voices that we have, and then we'll have more question and answer afterwards. It's also because I want to be very specific that when we talk about crimes against humanity, that's a rather specific term. I also want to welcome Mo, who is, this is not his real name, but for his protection, we are not using his real name, and he's been covering events on the ground in Myanmar all this time since the coup. Erin Rosenberg, however, is a legal expert, and she can join us to talk about what I mentioned before. Crimes against humanity is a very specific legal definition, isn't it, Erin? How did you go about compiling events or information about events that might be defined as such? What was the methodology?
Thank you for that question. Yes, you're exactly right. Crimes against humanity is a very specific term. To begin with, I want to be clear that we are not speaking about human rights abuses. And as Chow Win mentioned, the real impetus of this report was after the military coup in February 2021, there was a dawning realization that from the world and certainly within Burma, that what we were seeing was not simply an assault on democracy, but the commission of crimes. And as early as March, different voices were already raising the question of if the crimes being committed were of the level of being international crimes, specifically crimes against humanity. Now, to explain what a crime against humanity is, if we think about an ordinary crime, such as murder, for example, murder becomes international. It becomes a crime against humanity when it is committed, and here I'm going to use the legal term, as part of a widespread or systematic attack on the civilian population in furtherance of a state policy. So what that means is that murder is a domestic crime. When murder is committed on a widespread or systematic basis, pursuant to a state policy, then it becomes a crime against humanity. In terms of the methodology that we used for determining whether or not crimes against humanity had been committed, the Burma Human Rights Network has a staff that operates within Burma who monitored social media, primarily, reviewing video evidence, which once they had flagged that evidence, they then went and verified and corroborated through interviews with family members, bystanders, the victims themselves when it was not a situation of the person being dead, to confirm that those incidents had taken place. I then carried out an assessment looking at the incidents as to, one, whether the contextual elements had been met in terms of, again, that this was a widespread and systematic occurrence of these acts in furtherance of a policy, and also which crimes they were specifically.
Erin, I hope you don't mind my asking, you're a very experienced lawyer. I wanted to ask, and in this field, so I wanted to ask about putting what people found in the context of sort of global atrocities. And what are we talking about here? How serious were your findings? Can you give us an example as well of something that people might be able to sort of relate to?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really want to stress, Veronica, is that the incidents documented by the Burma Human Rights Network are only a subset of the crimes and incidents that have occurred. This research, for example, took place over a 3-month period. The coup has now gone on for 6 months. So that's just to give a scope of the actual enormity of crimes that have been committed. Second, we know that other crimes, that there's a reasonable basis to believe that other crimes have been committed. So for example, BHRN was not able, and part of video evidence, obviously, to document incidents of sexual violence. But we know from other organizations that these crimes have been committed. So I want to that what we were able to verify and occurred. But the crimes specifically that we believe there is a reasonable basis to conclude have occurred on a widespread systematic basis are murder, imprisonment or deprivation of liberty, enforced disappearance, torture, other inhumane acts, and the crime of persecution. And the crime of persecution is where you carry out one of the other crimes for discriminatory purposes. And to explain what I mean by that is that many of the instances of murder, for example, are the crime of murder as a crime against humanity. But in addition, they were carried out on the basis of the political identity of the people, a discriminatory intent, essentially. And that also makes it the crime of persecution.
Sorry, what do you mean by political identity?
So essentially, they are anti-military junta. would be the political identity. And so the reason why, this is to say that the reason why people are being attacked, it is not merely that they are civilians, but it is that they are in opposition for political reasons to the military junta. And that is what is a protected status under the crime of persecution. So it is not that civilians are being attacked indiscriminately. It is that civilians who are perceived to be anti-junta, who are pro-democracy protesters, are being attacked.
Is there any one case, Erin, that you would like to highlight?
There are so many cases that are so very horrific and shocking, but maybe just to pick one is an incident that covers numerous crimes, actually. A grandfather and father who were arbitrarily detained, so illegally arrested. They were then taken to a detention center along with the 2-year-old daughter or 2-year-old granddaughter, and they were then tortured in front of her in order to force them to confess. So we have in this one incident arbitrary detention, we have torture, and we also can see from this the multiplicity of victims. It is not only the grandfather and the father, but it's also a child, literally an infant, a 2-year-old, who had to witness this, who was so traumatized that she was unable to stop crying even when she was finally released.
Absolutely horrific. Erin, can I just ask you about the lengths to which the investigators, or the people who gathered this information, may have put themselves at risk?
Absolutely. This is a really important question. The individuals who are working within Burma to document what is happening are putting their lives at risk, and they're putting the lives of their loved ones at risk. We know, and we have documented in the report as well, for example, that murder and arbitrary detention is happening not only to those who are protesting the coup, but also to, for example, journalists, civil society members, other persons who are attempting to document what is occurring. So anyone who is a human rights researcher or a journalist who is trying to simply report on what is happening is at risk. They are being targeted. Journalists are being more and more targeted by the junta. And so it is incredibly dangerous. And their bravery is really why this report was able to be written. It could not have been written without what they risked to get this information out.
I also want to ask you, before we go to Ambassador Rapp, Erin, about, you have so much experience as a senior advisor for the Center of the Prevention of Genocide at the US Holocaust Memorial Museum. You are a member of the editorial committee of the Journal of International Criminal Justice and the ABA Working Group on Crimes Against Humanity. Can I ask you why you are so committed to this cause and what it means to you that you're investigating something like this in 2021?
I think that in terms of what is happening in Burma, one of the reasons why this situation for me is so, why I'm drawn to working on it is because of the incredible length of time that the military has oppressed, controlled, and violated the rights of the people of Burma. This is decades upon decades of the repetition of different crimes. Whether we're speaking about the Rohingya, whether we are speaking about other ethnic groups, the history of the Tatmadaw is decades of criminal activity and and crimes against humanity and genocide. And so now we are seeing in 2021, as you say, the same criminal organization carrying out a military coup of a democratically elected government. And it is the impunity over decades that they have been able to act with that has so emboldened them to continue for years and years to violate the rights and commit crimes against the very people that they claim to represent. And so I think in that sense, it is just simply the length of this situation that makes it something that really is so very urgent for the world to finally say, enough. This must stop. The people of Burma must be able to choose and to have the country that they want and the future that they want without the Tatmadaw controlling their lives.
Thank you very much. Very powerful words and very important words, Erin. For the time being, I'm going to move on, although I'm sure we will come back to you in a little bit, because I want to turn to Ambassador Stephen Rapp, who was US Ambassador at Large for war crimes issues for, I think, 2009 to 2015, and was also at the he was prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone, I believe, beginning in January 2007, leading the prosecutions of the former Liberian president, Charles Taylor, and other persons alleged to bear the greatest responsibility for the atrocities that were committed during the civil war in Sierra Leone. It's a real pleasure to have you here sharing your expertise with us, Ambassador Rapp. It is long past time for the world to do something about this situation. We've heard it from Jo Wynn. We've heard it from Erin just now. You're somebody who's something of an insider. You know what happens in the conversations when people who have real power talk about getting justice for crimes like this. Why is it taking so long? What can be done?
Well, I think definitely things that can be done. First of all, I think it's important to note, as Erin has told us, that these are international crimes. Sometimes people talk about internal affairs, or our Chinese friends are always talking about this as internal affairs. Crimes against humanity are international crimes, even when they happen entirely within one country and have no impact on any other. Though obviously the crimes in Myanmar have had tremendous impact in the region. And that really puts the responsibility on the international community. This has been a difficult situation to deal with in the past. We've had horrendous crimes, for the last 60 years. And frankly, the international community, when there was an opportunity to support a transition, an imperfect transition, in which there were elections, albeit under a constitution where the winners of that election wouldn't really control the security services or most powerful agencies of government, and couldn't change the constitution. That there was a tendency to say, well, this is better than nothing. We can move forward. There can be progress, and I think we all made a mistake in not pressing for justice, because one thing we've learned in the world is that you can get away with things like the mass clearance operation of the Rohingya, sending 750,000 people over the border into Bangladesh in 2017, a crime that I frankly think is genocide. Then the idea of shooting 890 people down in the street doesn't seem that serious. If you can just constantly thumb your nose at international standards and law, you'll continue to commit these crimes. And I think the lesson in all of this is that even though we want this crisis to end, there'll be those that say, well, if they just let the prisoners go, if they reschedule elections, then we can go back to January 31st of 2021. We can't go back there, because it'll just happen again. And that presumes that even the elections that are then scheduled will be as free as the elections that occurred earlier. The world really has to insist on justice at this time. It's difficult. Unlike situations, I was a prosecutor in the Rwanda tribunal, mass atrocity, 800,000 people murdered in 100 days, a genocide. The world came together and formed a tribunal there. Frankly, the genocidal government had been defeated in a civil war. We had to chase up the suspects in 26 different countries, and eventually we convicted them of some of the same crimes against humanity that are being committed in Myanmar, and also the crime of genocide. In other situations, it's been possible to succeed. There's been a transition, and governments that have been called for international assistance. In this situation, we obviously have China threatening to veto any resolution in the Security Council to establish a court like we did for Yugoslavia or Rwanda or Sierra Leone, or to send it to the ICC as we did the situation in Sudan and Libya. So it's not, we can't work in those particular ways, but there are other ways that we can push forward justice. Some of them immediate, some of them already done in terms of sanctioning the individuals that are responsible for these crimes, against whom there are strong evidence, thanks to civil society organizations like BHRN and others, information that's now been brought together by the United Nations and this international mechanism in Geneva, headed by my good friend Nick Kumjian. They're bringing this information, like today's report, together with other information from the social media, and corroborating it and verifying it and vetting it, and then allowing that information to be used in things like the ICJ case, the case at the International Court of Justice regarding the crimes against the Rohingya, but also at the International Criminal Court regarding the forced deportation into Bangladesh, and in universal jurisdiction cases that could be brought in third countries. That could include the crimes committed, described here since February 1st, 2021, and the crimes against other ethnic groups. So there are pathways to justice, but I mean, fundamentally, we have to, I think, take a different approach this time, all of us. Glad to see Dr. Sasa as part of this, and we really appreciate the fact the NUG is putting out statements regarding the fact that the Rohingya are part of Myanmar, actually using the term that the group uses itself. And I think there needs to be specific commitments that in the future, Myanmar is not 135 ethnic groups, it's 136, that there is an approach, a federal approach that respects all of the minorities in a unified country, and that guarantees everyone's citizenship rights, and that there be changes in things like the 1982 citizenship law. This has to be key to it, because it's key to having the kind of support that the future of Myanmar will need at the international level. But at the same time, we need to press ahead through every one of these avenues to get justice, to get cases going. And frankly, there will soon be a case in the International Criminal Court against probably the supreme leader for his engagement in the genocide of the Rohingya, which of course isn't the crime of the Rohingya continue to be persecuted, is not the specific crime that we're talking about in this report, but it's all of a piece. The Tatmadaw has fought various groups at one time or another, and now has basically declared war on the whole nation. And I think the whole nation is now coming together, and to see the young people in the street, as we see the pictures in this report, braving the bullets, and many of them dying, as we described, being murdered, as described in this report. It's horrific, but it also inspires all of us to redouble our efforts to make sure that the future is not the same as that of the last 60 years. And if the international community unites and makes it clear that there is no normalization, no regularization, no recognition, no way back except through justice, then I think we'll get where we need to go. And in the meantime, there will be cases, and there is evidence that's been gathered, and we can build, we can clearly create the perception that you're not going to get away with this.
Ambassador Rapp, I wanted to ask you, and because I'm on social media quite a lot, and I know that Burmese people across the country see the international community's failure as being tantamount to being in cahoots with the junta in Myanmar. They think they want to know why the international community keeps letting them down. Is this a matter of the great powers playing some kind of game in which they are sort of, it's a sort of self-serving strategy. They don't really want to undermine people who they actually do recognize as the government, despite the fact that power was taken illegally through a coup in February?
Well, I don't think that's the situation. I mean, obviously there are always challenges to particular states to look at their interests, to look at where they want to take risks. Certainly with their own citizens, with their own economy and everything else. And I know as someone that sat in the councils of government and has fought hard for justice, in the position that I had in the Obama administration, I traveled to 87 countries, dealt with dozens of situations of mass atrocity, and getting coalitions developed, getting my own government to prioritize these issues is always a challenge because different states have different interests. But certainly, I have seen on the part of a great many countries an enormous interest in the respect of human rights in Myanmar, in pressing for years during the time that Aung San Suu Kyi was under house arrest, and the generation of 1988 was imprisoned and tortured for an opening, and then frankly. Perhaps they had a triumph of hope over experience and believed that things really would change. The military would make a full opening, and frankly they didn't, and they just seemed to think they had the right to throw out an election because they lost it, and take over the government, use this provision they'd written into the Constitution, Section 417, and control everything, and no democratic respect, and no respect for the nation, and so that kind of thing happened.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
and frankly,
Ambassador
we shouldn't have let it happen.
Right. I'm going to put you on the spot, I'm afraid, but you've got such wide and deep experience of trying to prosecute these crimes. If there's any one thing that the Myanmar people can do to try and get justice, what do you think works?
Well, what works is what we're talking about in this report. Now, I know it can be a long and challenging struggle, but if you build evidence, if you build the strong evidence that shows the crimes are being committed and that points directly to the individuals that committed them, you can find a way into court. And I've seen that in situations. I was on a panel this morning that was discussing this morning in the United States 12 hours ago, where we were discussing Nuremberg and a particular case involving 1 million people, in which the report was found in a German ministry, and a young prosecutor who's still with us now at 101 found a way to bring that case into court and convict the key perpetrators. One of the cases I worked on, I mean, I don't want to, we're talking about the rest of the world. I know we had a dictator in Chad that was supported by a lot of Western countries, including mine, tortured 40,000 of his own people, was overthrown, emptied the treasury, went to a country 2,000 miles away and thought he was safe. And because the evidence was developed that showed him actually ordering the torture in his own hand, that case was taken to Belgian courts, it was taken to Senegalese courts, it was taken elsewhere by the victims. And eventually we developed a court within the African Union and Senegal to try him. And today he's sentenced to life in prison for crimes against humanity and war crimes, convicted 25 years after he left power. The signal is that if you commit these crimes, there's no rest in this life. And if you've got the evidence, we'll find a way. We'll find a court. We'll find a place. And then we'll pressure, as we did with Charles Taylor. The Special Court for Sierra Leone had no right to, had no authority under the UN to compel countries to cooperate with us, but we used political influence and levers. And because he continued after his exile to be involved against the agreement under which he went into exile, we were able to get him arrested in Nigeria and transferred to the court, and then tried in The Hague, and today during 50 years sentenced for crimes against humanity and war crimes. We had extremely strong evidence of his involvement in the mass murders and rapes and the amputations that have been committed in the neighboring country of Sierra Leone. So if you really do develop the evidence and you push at the levers and use the precedents that we have, even against this, the threat of vetoes from Russia and China that we've had in this situation, we can find a way into court. So the key thing is to record it, to know it, and when you hear the inciting messages on Facebook, to save those messages and to preserve them and find a way to get them to the international community. It's not a perfect solution. It can take a very, very long time. But if we don't, and that's why I continue to work on this issue in my 70s, and I'll keep working on it until the day I die. We are going to chase down these Tatmadaw guys, and they're going to be in the dock, and they're going to pay for the crimes. And those 890 people, those young people that have been murdered, those for torturing that grandfather and son in front of a baby. I mean, there's going to be consequences. But the key that we always need is we need the evidence, we need the documentation. We have that. We'll continue to press to find a place for it to be heard.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Stephen Rapp, for the time being. Just to let everybody know, we're about halfway through our allocated time, and we are launching here the Burma Human Rights Network's latest new report. Before our very eyes, Myanmar's military junta commits crimes against humanity while the international community fails to act. We've heard from the head of BHRN. We've heard from Erin Farrell Rosenberg, who's involved in authoring that report. We've heard from Ambassador Stephen Rapp, really distinguished and experienced people telling us, what the importance of all this is. And we really appreciate your solidarity and your support. As you can see on your screen at the moment, we have two other guests that we must get to. Dr. Sasa, of course, is well known to everyone, and we will ask him to speak finally. I'm sorry, I hope that you can bear with us. Dr. Sasa, we'll come back to you in a moment. It's just that I want to go from the corridors of power, as it were, which Ambassador Stephen Rapp was kind enough to give us an insight into how things work there. Let's go onto the ground in Myanmar and what it's really like. We haven't really talked about what the situation is right now. And it's not just the atrocities that have taken place during the sort of coup and in the aftermath of the coup that are absolutely awful at the moment. But we now have this added awful tragedy of the pandemic COVID-19. And Momo, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to tell us about to describe what the situation is right now and how it plays into the findings that we're talking about here.
Okay. So the situation right now in Myanmar is like we are facing such a tragic shortage of oxygen and lack of public health care. So first, we have been queuing in front of ATMs to get our own money, and then we have to get treatment. We have to queue to get treatment at the hospital, and then now people are queuing at the cemeteries to get the funeral service. I've been told by some sources that if you want to get a quick funeral service, quick cremation service, you have to bribe the cemetery. And currently I'm investigating about that. And also many people are lining up in front of oxygen plants, but there is a military presence. There are like a bunch of soldiers in front of each oxygen punch, and it's such an intimidating in this kind of situation. Everyone is stressed. We are now risking our own lives amid the deadly COVID-19 outbreak, and we are like people on the ground are like fighting for like trying to save the lives of their loved one. But in the same time, our people also have to face such kind of intimidation, and they are like long queues of like 3 to 4 days to refill oxygen cylinders. But at one point, if the military or a group of soldiers, if they want to refill their oxygen cylinder, they just cut the line and they do whatever they want, and they still intimidated. Also in Taungu, on 18 July, I was told that a man who refilled oxygen cylinders on the way back, his cylinders were confiscated by the soldiers, and he was threatened that if we see oxygen cylinders with you next time, we will spend a bullet for each oxygen cylinder. I mean, why? The military do not have any capacity to fill this gap of oxygen shortage, and they've been always lying and doing propaganda on their state-owned TV, and also newspaper. Today on Global News site of Myanmar, they are saying that there are some propaganda that they have been distributing oxygen. And Mayor said in the meeting that they have enough oxygen. People are just panic. He even accused that some people want to misuse this as political benefits. But in reality, I mean, everyone focus right now is about the healthcare and well-being right now. Of course, in this time of outbreak, there are many young people still protesting. And a few days ago, there was a young girl in Mandalay. She was shot ahead in a protest. Young people are still fighting. They are still showing their defiance against the military. And 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 now, as a journalist, our focus is like how to say the oxygen shortage and the public health. But also, I want to highlight that there are also young people still out there, protesting, and even like one of them got shot and in the head. This is intentional. This is very intentional.
Mamo, I just want to let the audience know, first of all, that Mamo is not your real name and that you're using an alias in order so that you can stay safe as you continue your journalism and to investigate the situation on the ground. And I also want to let people know that they can give us comments and questions as they watch in the comments on our YouTube channel here at the Burma Human Rights Network, and also on the Facebook Live page as well. So we'd really appreciate any of your comments or questions. We can go a little bit over time in order that we address your questions. Mamo, before I let you go and we go to Dr. Sasa, I have one more question, which is you've talked about how the military is dealing with the pandemic. I want to ask you whether it's your view that it's been weaponized, that the pandemic is being used by the military as a weapon, and in their very handling of the crisis, they're possibly using the pandemic as a sort of new form of that could come under crimes against humanity.
Yeah, I also think the same way because they have been using the pandemic and the oxygen shortage, the oxygen crisis, as a tool. So now it could be like they are less and less protests. I mean, there are still protests in many cities. Yesterday in Yangon and a day before in Mandalay, even a protester was shot dead. Like I said, people are still protesting, but they are like, but the military is like, but majority of the people are now occupied with oxygen crisis and the public health problem. So the military is happy and they just let things happen. They just let these things happen, and they do not find any solution to help people. I will tell you an example. So yesterday there was a news saying that the military is now expanding the cemetery. It's horrible. It's horrible. They have to find a solution how to provide oxygen cylinders, how to provide the better healthcare, how to make the medicine getting cheaper, and not to confiscate the cylinders. Try to comfort people that you can get treatment at the hospital, or like you get a vaccination, but they are not doing that. But instead, they are trying to they are not trying this. They're expanding the cemetery, which is horrible, and they are also afraid that so last 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, there were some videos on social media, like many dead bodies lined up at the cemetery. Like, I'm talking about hundreds of dead bodies. They are reporting that there are more than like 600, or sometimes there are more than 1,000 dead bodies in different cemeteries in US. So these kind of like images were widely spread on social media, and the military thinks that it is harming their reputation. So they don't want all these dead bodies to pile up at the cemetery. They want all these dead bodies lied in the ambulance that carry dead bodies, that transport dead bodies to the cemetery until they get their funeral service. Then they can leave. So before that, the ambulance were like, come to the cemetery, uh, left the dead bodies, and then they head off. But now all these dead bodies have to wait in the ambulance to get the funeral service. That's why I'm saying that our people are still queuing for the funeral service. People are going without dignity. That's horrible. That's horrible.
Yes.
They don't care about our dignity, but they just only care about their reputation, and they also want to make people to rely on their system, but they don't have any mechanism, any idea. Instead, like, they are just expanding the cemetery.
Mamo, we're going to have to leave it there, and I want to go back to this idea of COVID and crimes against humanity with Erin a bit later, because I know she wants to take that up. I've just got a message about that, so just hold on for a minute, if I can ask everyone to be patient, and just so that we can go to our last distinguished speaker. I think everybody's been waiting to hear what he has to say. Dr. Sasa, of course, he's the Minister of International Cooperation in the Cabinet of the National Unity Government, and he's a Chin medical doctor, philanthropist, and civil society activist previously, and has been the special envoy of the committee representing the Pidang Su Plateau to the United Nations. He's a founder of Health and Hope, a Christian health organization that works with churches to promote development in Chin State and trains villagers to become community health workers. So he's extraordinarily sort of qualified to talk about all the things that we've been speaking about in the last 45 minutes or so. Dr. Sasa, can you tell us what your reaction is to the findings of the Burma Human Rights Network in this report before our very eyes? What do you think?
First of all, let me reiterate our decision thanks Burma Human Rights Network for documenting all this crime against humanity happening in our land, in our country, amongst our people. And as Ambassador Stephen has clearly said, it's important for us to document all this crime against humanity so that these military generals, the perpetrators, should be held accountable for their actions, crime against the people of Myanmar. And secondly, I just like to update all of you to know that we as People's Capital of Myanmar have taken responsibility to document this crime against humanity. I can tell you that we have got more than 151,000 emails containing of 310,000 videos and photos of the atrocities committed by the military junta in Myanmar. They include the detailed documenting of 936 civilians being killed by the military junta, including 72 children and 20 medical personnel. And there has been, as we speak, 600 plus medical personnel have been issued arrest warrant by the military junta for doing nothing wrong. All they do was attacking COVID-19 in the country. And then there has been 256 minimum at least 256 attacks by the military junta on the medical personnel who are the national hero, saving the life of the COVID patients in this very difficult time. And nearly 7,000 in accurate number, 6,946 people who have been arrested illegally by this military junta. And we have documented at least 28,000 victims of crime against humanity committed by the military junta since 1st of February. And we have detailed all that into ID case, diagnosis of the accident, the date, the location. One of the strong case that struck my heart and that broke my heart. We have got these 497 strong cases that has been looked by human rights lawyer. And one particular case is Mr. Angko Eko. He was shot by the military junta troops around 9 a.m. in the morning and wounded. And he was brought into burning tire. They burned alive as his mother watched. And he said to his mother, "Mother, please help me. Please help me." And he was burned down to the ground. And we have got all the photos, the details, and all the locations, exactly what happened. We know. And now is the question to international community that they have to do everything they can in their part to stop these perpetrators in Myanmar. They must hold accountable for the actions that they have committed, not only the people of Myanmar this time, but this military junta, as the Ambassador Stephen says, they all repeating this crime against humanity in the history of Myanmar for the last 74 years. In our very fresh memory, we say that our Rohingya brothers and sisters were slaughtered, exodus. If there was no crime against humanity, if there was not about atrocities and genocide, what would that be? What would we term that crime? So this is again the reputations of all that crime against humanity, and we cannot normalize this crime in my country. We will never allow the normalization of the killing of nearly 1,000 civilians in Myanmar. We will never allow ourselves to be normalized that at least 1.2 million people of innocent Myanmar are being displaced by the military junta. At least 6.4 million people of Myanmar are going to be forced to hunger and starvation without food by end of October this year. At least 27 million people of Myanmar are going to force into extreme poverty under the watch of Min Aung Hlaing and his military junta. Finally, I'd like to say again that this COVID-19 third wave, that my dear brother Mao Mill has clearly said the atrocity happening is searching unchecked, unprotected, uncontrolled. It's out of control in my country. This third wave. UN Security Council, international organization has the responsibility to protect the people of Myanmar from this third wave COVID-19. There has to be immediate resolution from UN Security Council calling for protections of medical personnel in Myanmar who will be giving vaccinations to the people of Myanmar. Otherwise, COVID-19 has no border. COVID-19 has no political affiliation. COVID-19 do not know about the culture, the language. It killed. The moment it's spread across the border, it will be a threat again to the global community. Now we are saying in the coming weeks, half population of Myanmar people will be infected COVID-19 Delta variant. It is dangerous. Myanmar should not be allowed to become the new breeding ground for COVID-19.
Dr. Sasa, I want to ask you about the humanitarian situation on the ground, as well as sort of how that works with the quest for justice for the kind of crimes against humanity that we've heard. Because I think the opposition, the democratic opposition, wants to have justice, but at the same time, in order for humanitarian work to be done, access is needed in areas under the control of the coup leaders. So there have been some ideas now that I've seen kind of circulating about how to do that. Should international humanitarian organizations or aid organizations be working with the military in order to help ordinary people who are innocent civilians?
Number one, the world is generous. There's many countries, there's many aid organizations, humanitarian organizations that is ready to help. They are ready to give. The question is not about vaccination of COVID-19. The question is not about food or shelter. All those are there ready. They all are asking one thing. Please let us help the people of Myanmar. But there is the man with guns waiting those COVID-19 vaccination to come so that they can bomb blast, so that they can disrupt, so that they are using COVID-19 vaccination as a weapon to brutalize the people of Myanmar, to victimize the people of Myanmar, to cause the maximum pain and suffering. That's all they have done. The military in Myanmar, all they do across the history of us, they bring death and destruction, pain and suffering to innocent civilians of Myanmar. So UN Security Council must impose very strong resolution on Myanmar military junta because COVID-19 is not a concern of Myanmar. Once Myanmar becomes super spreader of COVID-19 third wave, there will be COVID-19 fourth wave, fifth wave, sixth wave. Myanmar should not be allowed to become another Wuhan. We cannot allow that. So international community, especially UN Security Council, have the responsibility to treat this as a threat to the global community, as humanity, because COVID-19 does not discriminate. So let's say, if there is UN Security Council resolution calling for COVID-19 ceasefire, calling that all the stops of all the violence, who is causing the violence in Myanmar? It's the military. It's not the people of Myanmar. The people of Myanmar are being forced to die in that miserable situation. It's unspeakable. What my people in Myanmar are going through right now, there's no language that can express this pain and the suffering and death and destructions that we are facing right now. I have no language that can describe this. So what I'm saying is the question isn't about humanitarian assistance there or not. There are thousands of humanitarian organizations that are ready to help the people of Myanmar. To do so, the military junta must withdraw all the battlefield weapons that they have discharged across the village, across towns, across the city, across the streets in Myanmar. So that has to be done. So the military junta in Myanmar has to meet with those serious conditions that they will not kill again the doctors, that they will not kill again the aid workers, that they will not kill again innocent civilians who are just trying to save their life from this pandemic. I can tell you, just a few days ago, 12 doctors, 6 doctors from Yangon, 6 doctors from Mandalay. They were trapped by the military. Let me tell you, how did they trap? Those doctors, they were helping COVID patients who are dying at their home. So the military become to know that those doctors are helping the patient dying. They call to those doctors, hello, I am a patient, I'm dying from COVID-19. My family are dying from COVID-19. When the doctor turned up to help, it was not the patient, it was the military man with gun waiting to arrest those doctors, and they arrest like that. Just imagine. So this is the military junta that we are facing right now. So UN Security Council must do the job, and they have the responsibility to do that right from the beginning. When COVID-19 pandemic hit the world, UN Security Council resolution 2565 already say global ceasefire. There has to be global ceasefire. We all have to use all our effort to attack COVID-19. But in Myanmar, the military junta are attacking the people, medical personnel who are attacking COVID-19. So completely opposite. What the military junta in Myanmar are doing are completely opposite to everything that we have done.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sasa. We'll get back to you as we look for questions. We're actually at about the time that we were supposed to end this live broadcast. I wonder if we can just take people's patience a little bit further so that we can hear from everyone again. We only heard very briefly from Jorwin a bit earlier. He's Executive Director of the Burma Human Rights Network. I wonder, Jorwin, if there's anything that you want to add to the comments that we've heard from everyone. And then I wanted to go around and ask Erin again about that issue that I mentioned a bit earlier about COVID and the way it's been handled as a possible crime against humanity. Sorry, go ahead, Jorwin.
Thank you, Veronica. As we heard from all the panel speakers, the experience and the what they have discussed here earlier, I can tell you that this is the time that the international community need to do something. We cannot allow the military to continue the same old system, the killing and murdering people and destroying the villages and committing crime against humanity to continue. There must be some accountability, and this accountability, before that we need to understand that this is the fascist military still operating in 21st century, and they are using all these tactics like focus. Like focus means they are deprivations of information, food, finance, and manpower. All this, they are using all these battle tactics against the civilian. This is very important to understand for the international community. The military, the fascist military of Burma, they are using all this battle tactic with the civilians, and they're deploying snipers, to kill these young people, to blow up their heads, just because they just practice their democratic rights. So this shouldn't happen in this 21st century, but it's happening. So what we're going to do? It is important that the international community must unite it, and we want to ask every country that has to practice their universal jurisdiction, if there's any room and is there any possibility. And before that, we need to we ask everyone, those who believe in justice, those who believe in rule of law, those who believe in those who are against that kind of atrocities, we need to collaborate each other. We need to come together. We need to be united. We cannot just only focus on our own organization and individually, chasing all this. It's not possible. So we need to be united. We need to form a stronger allies, and also international community, the countries, the states, they need to support that. And we have to make sure this general, this murderer, this genocider has no place, nowhere to go on this earth. They have to their freedom must be also squeezed, and their resources, their support need to be taken away. And we urge from here that to the P5 countries in UN Security Council, this is a time to show the humanity, not to play the politics. This is a time to show to tell the world that the world is bigger than P5 countries. No, like country like Burma, we are just become a victim between the powerful nation, and we are not, ready to see this happening, what happened in Burma, to continue happening in many other countries, to copy the situation in Burma, then apply that example in other countries. Of course, no one want to happen this. So in order to, before this fire spread out, we need to stop where it started. So we need to take out the root from the root. So we have to, as the Rohingya cases now, Rohingya genocide cases in ICJ, we need to do more. We need to more effort. We need to put more efforts to bring this general to the justice. So I think it is a very important, crucial time we are in. The people of Burma expecting to the international community to support it, because we are civilian. We have a very limited resources against a very resourceful, well-trained, well-armed, well-organized army. So we need support. Without the support, how can we fight this war? We are putting our life into the danger. We are risking our life. Of course, whatever we can, we are doing, but it is not enough. We need support. So what we are seeking is one way. The most important thing right now, it's a crucial time, is in UN the UN should recognize NUG government. I understand that there are some legal matters. There must be some things that the NUG government need to do. Of course, NUG government is doing their best, because they also, don't forget that they also staying hiding in Burma. They're trying to save from all this military operations and to save their life, and still they are working their best. So we must understand their difficulties as well. And on the other hand, NUG government need to understand that the international community is expecting something, the more inclusive of the minorities. That's what international community is expecting from NUG, and the international community is also understand that in the strategy on Burma, in the past, what we've seen is the minority issues, religious and ethnic minority issues, had been separated from democratic reform in Burma, which is a very wrong strategy. This is the root cause of all the problem in Burma. You see that is a matter I need to address. These two matters are intertwined between each other. The minorities and the religious minorities and ethnic minority issues, and the democratic reforms in Burma is very. These are the same situation, the same. I mean, intertwined in these two matters. So we need to focus on that. In my conclusion, I think what happened right now, the COVID outbreak, is outrageous. The way the military has been using this, weaponizing it, it's clearly is a crime against humanity. I think my colleague Irene, who is a legal expert, can explain more details. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Jorwin, for those comments. And for providing such a good segue to hear from Erin. Erin, before you speak, I just want to say that we do have comments on our social media, on the Facebook page of the FCCT. And there is one outstanding question. I think we'll go to Dr. Sasa after hearing from Erin to ask him to answer that question. It's from Ian Hollingworth, where he says, so we wait for the military to comply with these conditions before we can deliver aid, ? So I will ask that of Dr. Sasa a bit later. For now, though, Erin, I do want you to address that question, which that issue which Jorwin segued to. COVID handling is a crime against humanity?
Well, this is such an important question, and it is addressed in our report. And to answer your question directly, no, not COVID handling. That is too broad. But I think that, we've heard just this incredibly powerful description from Momau of what is actually occurring. We've heard from Dr. Sasa describing the attacks on medical professionals. And, Veronica, crimes against humanity, one of the points that I should have said is that we used the statute of the International Criminal Court. And what I mean by that is that crimes against humanity is a list, right? It lists specific acts that qualify as a crime against humanity when committed on a widespread or systematic basis pursuant to a policy. The last act is called Other Inhumane Acts. And basically what this is a catch-all. And its description is, these are acts of a similar character to one of the listed acts, causing great suffering or serious injury to body or physical health. Now, in our analysis, and as we heard Mo Mao so really devastatingly describe, the junta is not only attacking medical professionals, but they're actually depriving COVID victims of oxygen, banning the sale directly to civilians, only permitting oxygen to be sold through their own controlled, Tatmadaw controlled distributors, preventing the distribution of oxygen. Now, when we stop and think about what this means, in our analysis, this is comparable. It is of a similar character to the listed crime of torture. To deny a person oxygen when they have a disease which prevents them from being able to breathe. That is of a similar character to torture. And in that sense, yes, we have concluded that there is a reasonable basis to believe that this is a crime against humanity, the crime against humanity of other inhumane acts. And maybe I would just say that of all of the things that we've talked about, you know, the ICC Rome Statute's preamble refers to crimes against humanity as those acts which deeply shock the conscience of humanity. The Tatmadaw is purposefully, intentionally keeping life-saving oxygen from people who have COVID. This is the very definition of shocking the conscience of humanity. And we are watching this, and the world is watching this happen. As the report is named, before our very eyes. This is happening. People are being prevented from being able to breathe by the Tatmadaw. So that
Thank you very much, Erin. We'll leave it. If I might be able just to turn to Dr. Sasa to answer that question, because Ian Hollingworth, I think, sent one question, and I'd like to just address this before we call it a day, unless anyone would like to make any extra comments. Let's have a look at that question again. It was about Dr. Sasa. Someone was saying, do we have to wait for the military to comply with the conditions that you described before aid is delivered? We can hear how people can't breathe. They need oxygen.
Now, the military junta that we are facing are attacking medical personnel, and that has to stop. We all have been calling, ASEAN have called, the world have called, the people of Myanmar have called with their life that these act of atrocities in this pandemic season has to stop. But the military junta in Myanmar are still sending battlefield weapons across the nation, across Myanmar, attacking medical personnel. So, as I said, the Blue FP, the World Food Programme, has predicted 6.4 million people of Myanmar will be without food by the end of October. 1.2 million people of Myanmar are being displaced by this same military junta act of terrorism against the people of Myanmar. And 27 million people of Myanmar within a year will be forced to live under extreme poverty. And this COVID-19 is surging into half population of Myanmar will be infected by this COVID-19 third wave in these coming weeks. half population of Myanmar people will be infected this COVID-19 third wave. That's according to the expert. So I say that is so huge, so big, so huge humanitarian catastrophe created by this military junta. That itself is a crime against humanity. It is systematic and widespread. This violence we see under the hands of Min Aung Hlaing and his military junta is both systematic and widespread across the nation. The same COVID-19, it is systematically, it's deliberately let it go to the people of Myanmar without any protections, control, management, or whatever. Attack, attack, attack. So there has to be coordination. There has to be a coordination that neutralization of humanitarian, neutralization of hospitals, neutralizations of medical workers, health personnel. Let's say now we have negotiated with COVID-19 donors, international community. There will be millions of vaccinations coming to my country. Yeah, some of them already arrived. I can confirm you, some of the vaccination has already arrived. Behind the scenes, me and my team at NUG, we have been working around the clock for this COVID-19 vaccination. It arrived, some of them. Now is the time to deliver those COVID-19 vaccination to the people who are desperately in need of that vaccination, and that's aid. But if military junta continue to occupy our hospital, continue to attack our health workers, medical personnel, how can we deliver this? That means there has to be series of monitoring mechanism, independent monitoring mechanism of the programs of AIDS and COVID-19 vaccination. Those independent mechanism, monitoring mechanism can come from ASEAN because ASEAN is the bloc they have been talking to the military junta. Our ASEAN brothers and sisters can do that. They can negotiate that. They can monitor the situation. If there's again attack on medical personnel, attack on hospitals, attack on COVID-19 vaccination center, they have to call off that program because it's not going to work. That will become another killing place, another massacre.
Well, I very much hope that ASEAN is listening and the people who can make a difference to that negotiation are indeed listening. Thank you very much for setting that out. Kind of fascinating ideas going forward, Dr. Sasa. We're quite a lot over time, I'm afraid. It's 12:14 here in Manila. I wanted to ask everybody if there's anything anyone else would like to kind of add to what we've been talking about here before we call it quits. Any hands up for anyone, or should we wrap it up at this point?
Well, let me just say something for a couple minutes, and it's 12:15 in the morning in Washington D.C. But
oh my goodness! Thank you
really
for staying up.
Yeah, appreciate this discussion. I mean, the horrors are so immense. It does indeed shock the conscience of humankind, as Aaron said. You know, so many of these crimes, and there was an analysis done at Berkeley, California, about how a lot of the crimes are crimes of terror against the civilian population. I mean, denying oxygen to people. You know, this whole idea is basically a military that wants to say, we control everything. You have no hope. You know, you need to surrender to us. Crimes that are just irrational and horrendous. And I think that underlies the importance of the international community being as serious as a heart attack, as being firm on this. Now, we don't give a lot of hope in the Security Council, but I think this issue on COVID and access needs to go there. Even in Syria, where Russia is very protective of the regime, we've got you know, a humanitarian corridor to bring in assistance to not through the government. You know, we need to press whatever issues that we can, arms embargo, those kinds of things, in the Security Council, and then to go to the General Assembly as a whole. And on that, as Cha Win said, it's very important to recognize that the General Assembly has spoken before on Myanmar. They did in the creation of the IIMM, which dealt with the crimes against the Rohingya, crimes that had been justified by the previous government. And the vote was like 140 to 12 in support of that. And the Islamic countries in particular feel very strongly about the Rohingya. So if there's going to be strong, Security General Assembly resolution recognizing the National Unity Government, allowing the ambassador in New York to stay in place, but also laying out the conditions for justice and peace in Myanmar, then I think it is important that the NUG make it very clear that the future is an inclusive one, and that there will be accountability for the crimes against the Rohingya, crimes against other ethnic groups, and against all the Burman people, everybody in the future, and that's got to be a key principle here. Justice and accountability, because if there isn't, these crimes will continue on into the future.
Thank you very much. Really important aspect that you've touched on there, Ambassador Rapp. I'm sure the NUG, through Dr. Sasa, present with us now, is listening and take note of your comments. I just want to say thank you very much indeed to everyone. Ambassador Rapp, it's in the middle of the night over there in the US, and it's really and I think for Erin as well. I think you're in the US as well, so I can only thank you so much for staying up and joining us here. It's very international because we're all, Jo Win, I believe, is in London, and the rest of us are here in Southeast Asia. So we really appreciate all your support and everybody who's watched and listened to this. It's going to remain on the Facebook page of the FCCT for everybody to listen to, and on the YouTube page, I believe, of BHRN, if not of the FCCT, so that people, please do direct anyone who you think might benefit or be interested in what we have to say, and can join us in supporting the calls for action that have been made very clearly, very strongly here. One final brief word, Jo Win, I can see you signaling at me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Veronica. I would like to thank everyone, Erin, Ambassador Stephen Rapp, and Dr. Sasa, and Maumo, and yourself as well, Veronica. And I know it is time. We have, of course, everyone to wake up late and early, and also to join people from around the world today. BHRN would like to thank you, and also I would like to special thanks to the team who risked their life, to collect all these documentations and work very hard. And I'm very proud to be leading a team that that dedicated with their life for the human rights cause. So that I'm really proud of. And thank you very much for all your support. And I hope that this report will give away and give some idea about what we are going to do the next step. It is very important to take a very serious step in coming days and coming months, and we must come together to join and collaborate to bring these murderers to justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to everyone for that valuable discussion, and it sets a very clear path forward. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
In fact,